President Biden is calling on Congress to pass a bipartisan border bill for, as he calls it, tougher border control. Sources say that bipartisan Senate negotiators have agreed to a plan that would empower the White House to crack down on illegal migrants crossing at the southern border. But House Speaker Mike Johnson warned a Senate border deal could face some strong headwinds in his chamber. He wrote this: "If rumors about the contents of the draft proposal are true, it would have been dead on arrival in the House anyway." Donald Trump is actively working to dismantle the deal. He says Republicans should not concede to a victory to President Joe Biden. With me now is Mika Soellner, congressional reporter for Punchbowl News. So let's start here with this statement that came out from the president overnight, in which he says this of the proposal: "It would give me, as president, a new emergency authority to shut down the border when it becomes overwhelmed. And if given that authority, I would use it the day I signed the bill into law." The characterization of a Democratic president, especially this one, saying that he would shut down the border, that rhetorical evolution, what does that suggest about strategy here and where the White House is going?
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me on. I think that the border has become a huge political problem for Democrats, and the Biden administration knows it. They're getting blasted on Capitol Hill by House Democrats, Senate Democrats, saying the border is out of control. The migrant crisis is getting out of hand, and it's all under President Biden's watch. And many House Democrats that I spoke to said that, the Biden administration should have acted sooner. They seem to have lost the narrative on the border, and Republicans are hammering this campaign message, calling Democrats that they're weak on the border. They're advocating for open borders. All of this is not going to bode well, especially in these southwestern states and states in close proximity to the border.
All right, so before we talk about the House, let's talk about the Senate, where these negotiations are happening. As we said, former President Trump does not want this bill to pass. He calls it meaningless and says they should wait for a perfect bill. Republican senators are not immune to the pressures of the former president. So is it clear that this will pass through the Senate, even make it to the House? And what are these Republican senators doing to placate former President Trump?
Yeah, that's a great question. The bipartisan negotiations that have been going on for 4 months now on getting this border deal done seems to be on very, very thin ice. And it's all thanks to former President Donald Trump, who doesn't want to give Joe Biden a victory on the border. But I'm going to add also that, conservative Republicans have been very, very critical of any negotiations on this bill. We're seeing, House Republicans saying that it's already dead on arrival unless it's something that mirrors a very hardline immigration and border security bill that they passed last year, or that exact bill. So there's a lot of tension and division among the Republican Party, but now Trump's outward opposition to this bill is really going to make it even more difficult to get anything done on this.
Yeah. This HB2 is the one you're talking about that the House passed and sent to the Senate, which was dead on arrival when it reached there last year. Is this an existential fight for Speaker Johnson? We saw what happened to former Speaker McCarthy. Any movement on border security before the election could cost him his seat?
Yeah, Speaker Johnson is in a very difficult position. I mean, we're already seeing the House Freedom Caucus, the most conservative faction of the House, become extremely irritated with him. And they've tied the border to basically every fight on Capitol Hill. They're going to be angry if he chooses to do another short-term government funding bill, which is likely what he's going to have to do again in March. And they're saying that, the border is going to be this top issue and that Mike Johnson has to do something. They try to get something attached, the HR 2 bill attached last minute on the last CR government funding bill. So there's no doubt that these hardliners are going to continue to push Johnson, and that that might ultimately end in the end of his speakership.
Let me ask you about the rest of this bill, because the border funding, about $13.5 billion, was added as a sweetener to try to get some Republican support for the tens of billions of dollars of aid for Ukraine and Taiwan and Israel. There are Republicans who believe that funding must be passed to turn the spigot on back to some U.S. allies. These can't be decoupled now. So what happens to all the foreign aid?
Yeah, the foreign aid is definitely also in question. There's already growing sentiment on Capitol Hill that's expanded widely by Republicans both in the Senate and the House, saying that they don't want to give any more money to Ukraine. I think there's a little bit more consensus on Israel, but foreign aid has been difficult. And I think a lot of this is due to the rise of some of the populist Republicans that have come to office in the wake of Trump's first presidency, where he started his America First movement that relies mostly on an isolationist foreign policy approach. And that's now widely what Congress is about. So, I think Ukraine aid is definitely in question. Whether or not anything gets done on this is going to be really, really challenging, especially combining these two very different and difficult issues.
Mika Soellner with Punchbowl News. Thanks.